It is a cloudy day with outbreaks of rain from time to time, and as we head into the afternoon, this rain, it could become heavier. Having said all of that, with a southerly wind, it is nice and mild. Top temperature this afternoon, 22 Celsius.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Hiya. Are you all right? Good, so am I. Telephone number, if you want to talk to the world, is 0161 228 2255. You can also communicate via the email system, the internet webby thing. Is that what it's called, the internet webby thing? Yeah, Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. And you can text on the telephony thummy thing. And the number for that is 07786 206 951. And I've now got one more telephone than I need. Because, you know, I told you we got burgled when we were on holiday. The holiday house was burgled. And they took the mobile phone. Which is fine. It's no great loss. And when I got back, they didn't take mine. They took my wife's phone. Mine was fine. Nobody wants mine because it's years old. And when I got back, we reported it missing and all that. And the insurance company rang up and said, well, yeah, we're going to pay out and all that caper, but we'll provide a phone rather than give you the money to buy one. We'll just send you a phone. That's fine, I don't care. So they sent me a phone. But in the meantime, we'd gone down to the phone shop to sort of buy one and then get the money off the insurance. And the bloke said, you don't have to buy one because you've got a contract and you're due a new one, so pick one. So now we've got a new mobile phone I got no use for because I don't want it. I like my own, well, like's a strong word for a phone, but I don't need to change it. And the one that they've got, and the one that they're giving us, replacing the one that we had, as it were, well, it's got a video on it, and you can put music on it, and it's a phone! I don't need all that, it's a phone! Exactly. So I don't know what to do with it. You can't just throw them away, can you? Can't, because that's not good for the environment. I don't know what happens. I think the bugs start making calls and getting their friends to come round. Yeah, and all that fuss about maggots in hospitals. They're just little baby flies. Why is everybody upset? Little baby flies. Oh, listen. I'm going to talk to Steve in Swinton in a minute. And to you, if you ring on 0161 228 2255. But reading the paper this morning was horrible. I mean, just that first moment, and I saw it. I saw it on the Daily Mail. I always put the Daily Mail up first of the pile because, well, I like to know what the fascists think. But it's really, I don't know. You know me, I'm not exactly heart on me sleeve type of a person. But there was a little gulp when I read the headline, and it's more or less the same headline in all the papers. But my name is Maddie. They took me from me mummy. And somewhere else it says, my name is Maddie, they took me off me holidays. And it's this sighting in Amsterdam last year. And it's, oh, do you know what I mean? Horrible. I said at the time that I hope that the kid's been snatched for some rich American that wants a little blonde daughter. That's what I hope. That's what I hope. Because all the alternatives are horrid. The alternatives are dead or worse. And I wouldn't often say that there was worse than dead, but dead or worse. Okay. There's a lot of story that haunting sighting police kept from the McCanns. Well, there's no reason for the McCanns to know, frankly. It's not their job to go looking for the kid in Amsterdam. I don't know whether they needed to know or not, but I can see why the police would say, no, we're not telling the McCanns. Why tell them? The kid's been seen, or a kid's been seen, but frankly, it's a police investigation. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, the whole story is, it's going to be with us for a decade, isn't it? The twists and turns of it. It's the equivalent, in some respects, although not quite as dramatic, it's the equivalent of the dingo story from about 25, 30 years ago in the Australian outback, where a couple were convicted and I think eventually jailed for murdering their baby, and their claim all the time had been taken from the outback by a dingo, a wild dog of Australia. Been taken by a dingo, and nobody believed them. He locked them up, and eventually they were allowed out on appeal. And the story appears in the newspapers from time to time, even now, all these years later. And I think Madeleine McCann is going to be that kind of a story for us, because there are similar circumstances, not by any means identical, but similar circumstances. Anyway, the whole story was just horrible. But do you think the police should have told the McCanns that this sighting has been reported? I don't know what it would have achieved. Anyway, I'd be interested to know your thoughts. Indeed, interested to know your thoughts on just about anything. You pick the subjects, and we rant around it. 0161 228 2255. It's 12:10. Steve in Swinton. Hiya, Steve.
How do you, mate?
What can we do for you?
I'm phoning about this decision by the Salford Council, or whoever it is, the medical board, about not treating this woman for cancer.
Right, well, they weren't not treating her, they were not providing a specific drug. Go on.
And they weren't providing a specific drug.
Yeah.
Well, I've been lucky enough to be working 28 years now.
Yeah.
And from the day I started work, I've been paying national insurance. No choice about the matter, I pay national insurance. At what point do they tell me that there are conditions upon what they will treat me for?
Well, at every point, there always have been.
No, as far as I know, I have to pay it, and when I get ill...
No, I was answering... Sorry, I was answering the question that you put rather than some other one. You asked me at what point do they say there are conditions on what they'll treat you for? And the answer is now. There have always been and always will be conditions.
Well, obviously you're older than me and know more then, because as far as I know, I have to pay it without choice.
No, I'll go back to the question. The question you asked me, and the question wasn't, do I have a choice about paying my national insurance? If you asked me that question, my answer would have been, no, you don't.
I have no choice, exactly.
Exactly. That's not the question you asked. The question you asked was, at what point, this was the question you asked, remember, at what point do they say, we will decide whether we treat you or not? That was the question you put.
Yes.
Well, that idea that the National Health Service will decide whether they treat you or not and how they treat you and what drugs they will provide, that's been there all the time. It's always been them that will decide. Always.
Well, by the same token, then, should we not have a choice whether we pay into it or not?
No, because... Let me ask you this, Steve. A very, very, very silly question. I promise you it's silly. I promise you it...
No problem.
OK,
yeah.
But I'm a broadcaster for a living. What do you do?
I'm a turner, engineer.
You're a turner. OK.
Yeah.
Now, if you go to hospital, all right?
Yep.
And you say to them, I would like you to give me, I don't know, 40 milligrams of morphine a week. And they'd say, why? And you'd say, well, it's none of your business. I've been paying in since I started work 27 years ago, and I think I might need it. I've got a bit of an headache, and I'd like 40 grams of morphine a week. Should they give it to you?
Well, you'd have to have a medical...
No, don't change the story. Here's the story, Steve. This is the story. You've got an headache, OK? That's all. You've just got an headache. You woke up one morning, you got a bit of an headache, and it'll probably be gone by lunchtime, it doesn't matter. But here you are, you've got an headache. You go to the hospital and you say, I've got an headache, I'd like 40 grams of morphine. Should they give it to you?
Well, on that basis, no, because
they shouldn't.
I do not know.
Steve, the answer to the question is, should they give...
The answer to the question is no.
No.
Fine, fair enough.
Because, well, you tell me why, because. Why shouldn't they give it you?
Well, because I'm not medically trained enough to know what I want.
So, OK.
Someone has actually seen a doctor and they say that this particular drug will suit her sorted.
Right. But you've already conceded that the authorities, at different levels, the authorities decide what treatment you'll get. Because you've already said you don't expect them to provide you the treatment you request.
No,
Correct?
you said if I went in and requested the morphine, well, I wouldn't know whether I needed morphine or
Of course you
a
wouldn't.
tablet.
Of course you wouldn't.
But this woman
The next thing is...
told what
the-
she needs.
Well, the next thing is we have to manage the money that we have in the National Health Service. You're a turner, and I suspect you, when you do a job, you always make sure, if you're self-employed, you definitely make sure that the work you're doing is worth the money you're getting for it, because otherwise you're going to go bankrupt. It's the same with the National Health Service. They don't have a bottomless pit of money. And things have to be, always have been, rationed. They always have been.
But you're not told that, are you, when you start? But you've got no choice other than to pay.
Well, you know that. You don't have to be told it. The first thing is that they take taxes off you, but they don't guarantee that you'll live forever. You know you'll
live forever.
No, they don't do that. And no amount of money will ever be enough for the National Health Service. It won't ever be enough for the National Health Service. Ever. It can't be. Because every time, well, they never have, but every time they get to the situation where they've got a surplus, there's always something to spend it on. It has to be rationed. It can't be any other way. Now, this woman who was told that this drug would be useful for her, that's fine in her case. But the authority says, we haven't got the money to pay for that. We haven't got the money to pay for that. Now, you can say they should have the money to pay for it. Well, OK, good argument. But what should they not do instead? Because they're left with a choice here. You've either got to get more money, which means your national insurance and taxes go up, or you've got to not treat somebody else. Which is it?
But I don't understand. Why did it? Is it? I presume that it is distributed between councils and different areas as to how much money they are allocated then.
Yes.
I thought it was one big, everybody pays
No.
to the government and then that's it.
Well, yes, everybody pays...
Obviously it's not.
Yes, everybody pays to the government, but then the government, or its agent, the National Health Service, allocates budgets to different elements of the National Health Service. It allocates budgets. It says, you can have that much this year, and you don't spend any more than that, but you can spend all of it. And
And then they all decide on what they can spend it on.
they can't do it any other way. How else would you do it? If you just... It isn't a demand system, it's a supply and demand system.
Oh,
So
she's demanding, isn't it?
Well, of course she is, but Steve, I put into your court the question that all health authorities face. All health authorities face. Do we treat that woman with the drug she wants and that the doctors think would be perfect for her? And if we do, that's an amount of money that we can't spend again. We either get more money from the government and the taxpayer, that's not going to happen, so what do we not treat instead? If we get her to stay alive, who do we let die?
Obviously, I live in an idealism where we treat everybody.
Well, I don't know why you live in that world. You told me you've been working 27 years. That makes you 40-odd. Just simple mathematics. Simple mathematics says you should have picked something up in the past 40 years.
Yeah, well,
Good on you, mate.
I guarantee you one thing, though, my friend.
Go on, Steve.
Any doctor tells me they're not going to treat me, he'll need a bed at the side of me. That one I'll guarantee you.
I think that constitutes a threat. We better move on. Have a good day, Steve.
All right, you too,
Ta-ra,
sir.
mate.
Thank you.
It is a problem, isn't it, with the National Health Service? I don't know the answer to... I know the questions. I don't know the answer to them. Are we to have a National Health Service that spends every penny it needs to, in which case yours and my taxes will be considerably higher than they are now, or do we have a National Health Service that says, frankly, we're not paying for that, in which case that's rationing? I don't know the answer, do you?
Your Sunday morning lion. with Mike Shaft.
In the secular world, they've been there for a while, all these, these YouTubes. So is it a good idea to have sites like this specifically for people of a religious nature?
I think it's only right that the Christian community should embrace new technology, whatever it be. Makes sense to me.
Mike Shaft.
How long do you think it'll be before you'll be able to make a pilgrimage to either Iraq or Iran?
That's to do with the politics of the world as it is, and really to see how that freedom can be enabled to Baha'is.
Manchester's faith, spirit, and life's difficult questions with Mike Shaft.
Did it leave a mark on you?
Sunday morning from 7 on BBC Radio Manchester.
I don't think they're called marks in God Bothering, are they? They're called stigmata. Anyway, it's 12:20. Let's get the latest news headlines. Michelle Adamson.
Rats in the maternity unit, wasps in the operating theatre and maggots living in a pair of slippers. Just some of the pests and infestations that the Conservatives say have been causing problems in 3/4 of our hospitals. Police in Trafford are hunting a lone gunman who committed 2 armed robberies in a matter of minutes on Sunday and then struck again on Monday. Union leaders are warning that postal deliveries will take longer because of the closure of sorting offices in Stockport, Oldham and in Bolton. Manchester's weather, plenty of rain this afternoon, still feeling very warm, highs of 22 Celsius.
You can imagine the picture, can't you, the visitors? Good God, man, how often do you wash your feet?
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, if you're heading to London on the trains, be aware delays of up to 45 minutes are facing train passengers at the moment on London Midland and Virgin train services between Birmingham New Street and London Euston due to signalling problems in the Rugby area. Make sure you check with National Rail before you travel. Now to the roads and have some better news if you're using the M6 northbound. All lanes have now been reopened and that broken down vehicle removed from the carriageway between junction 26 Orrell and 27 Standish. In Altrincham, though, watch out for these roadworks causing slight delays on Ashley New Road. The southbound is closed off between Cross Street and Moss Lane. The road, of course, remains open northbound into town. And for southbound traffic, there is a diversion via Oxford Road. Don't forget, though, if you happen to spot a problem, make sure that you call in if you can on the travel line. And the number that you need is 0161 244 4951. I'm Carol Banks.
Decongesting Manchester, one car at a time. 2020 traffic.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Kevin says that lady and her husband who've been slagging off Salford Health Trust for not prescribing her the drugs she wanted has said Salford did nothing for her. I think she'll find that Salford has spent many thousands on both her and her husband over the years. The fact that she has a terminal illness is the very reason that even more money is not being wasted. As cruel as it may sound, the drugs may not prolong her life for more than a few weeks. There's no guarantee they will. The only thing which is guaranteed is that they're not going to save her. Regards, Kevin. That's a stark reality, isn't it? That is a very, very stark reality. In the end, is it worth £3,000 a month to keep someone alive for a month longer? I wish the lady no harm, for sure, but you have to consider, don't you? If it's going to prolong the life for a year, 36,000 quid looks good. If it's going to prolong the life for a month, 3,000 quid, how does that look? You tell me. 0161 228 2255. In the end, the question is, should the National Health Service be a bottomless pit of money from which the doctors and the medicos of various kind and health administrators just scoop out the money they require as they require it? In other words, they spend it and worry about how it's going to be found later, or should it be a budgeted service as it is? You tell me. Do you want a bottomless pit? And if you do, will you pay for it? Rita in Openshaw. Hi, Rita.
Hiya, Alan.
What can we do for you?
Well, you know what? I can't get my head round a course of tablets, which is 28 tablets, costing £3,000. I mean, you're talking about £1,000 a tablet.
You are indeed.
And I just can't get my head around that. I know about the investment and the experimentation, which happens in technology. You know, with like the digital TVs are very expensive, then they come down, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Because all the experiment stuff is gone and they're cheap to produce. Why doesn't this happen with tablets? And can you explain to me, I mean, I know it's not your fault, but I just can't get my head around a tablet being over £1,000 per tablet. Who's being ripped off here?
Well, without getting involved in who's being ripped off, I can tell you why medicines cost as much as they do, and you touched on it yourself. For every successful tablet, let's just stick with tablets, for every successful tablet, drugs companies have spent tens and sometimes hundreds of millions on unsuccessful ones. So they, as a company, need the successful ones to pay for the unsuccessful ones. Now, you might say, well, why don't they just do the successful ones? Well, you can't. You can only produce successful ones every so often from the project that it might work. It might not work. So you end up following 10 different scientific leads, 9 of which get nowhere, 1 of which delivers a successful drug. But you need to pay all those bills with that one drug.
Well, I do realise that, Alan, and I mean, I suppose if you go back, say, 30, 40 years, aspirins could have been quite expensive. Now they're 10 a penny. Do you think we'll ever get to the stage where these cancer drugs will become a reasonable, I'm not saying cheap, a reasonable price? Because it just seems absolutely extortionate.
There's 2 answers to that, and they both mean no. But I will explain why in a minute. The aspirin one is a very good one. When I was nursing, we had a painkiller called Panadol.
Yes.
And it was very, very expensive because it was very, very effective. And it had just been invented.
Yes.
Now, Panadol was a trade name, and it derived its name from a variety of things, not the least of which that it relied upon paracetamol. And not long after I went into nursing, the licence for Panadol expired. And paracetamol, the sort of chemical equivalent, and I hope they don't sue me, but the chemical equivalent was a lot cheaper. And so we started to prescribe paracetamol instead of Panadol. Panadol was all there was, and then once its licence expired, all the other drug companies piled in with their versions of the copy. And now, Panadol and paracetamol cost much the same.
Yeah.
Now, that's fine with painkillers. With drugs for cancer, before they get cheap, they've usually become redundant. And the reason they've become redundant is because somebody else has made a better one, not just a replacement. The knowledge that we get, a friend of mine is a very senior oncologist, and the knowledge
You've got some handy friends.
I know, yeah, but I'm never poorly. I've got only bloody doctors for friends. I'm never ill. What I need is bankers. That's what I need as friends. Bankers. I've never got any money. A very good friend of mine is a senior oncologist, and he will tell you that whereas drugs normally become cheap because you can get the chemical equivalent of them 5 or 6 years later, with the speed at which drug treatment is developing, unfortunately, the new drugs cease to become cheap. They actually become redundant. Yeah. Because they've been, for want of a better term, improved upon or been replaced by another one.
But it's a cartel in a way, because I'm sure other drug manufacturers could manufacture this drug a lot cheaper, but they won't be able to get the licence, will they? Well, because it's a monopoly.
It isn't. It is a monopoly, and they are guaranteed a monopoly for certain years. But if they weren't, let us assume this drug, £3,000 a month. Let us assume that we said to the company, OK, there's your £3,000 a month for a month. And in that month, all the other drug companies are analysing the drug, and they bring out a replacement. A replica drug.
In the pound shop.
In the pound shop.
Yep.
All right. So the £27 million that it's cost, it's probably cost more than that, £270 million that it's cost to produce that drug, yeah?
Yeah.
Doesn't get recovered by the drug company because they're all buying the pound version.
Yeah.
Do you think the drug company is going to carry on, or is it just going to go pop?
Well, they won't be making any money. So
they won't be making any money, so they won't do it. So you and I will be condemned.
Money, though, isn't it? And extortionate.
Well, I don't know whether it's extortionate. I don't know whether it's extortionate. That's what they do. They make money. They don't make drugs. They make money. The only way they can get us to give them the money is by selling us drugs. They've got to develop them.
Yeah.
And if we don't allow them to recoup their costs before we let everybody else have a go at it, they'll stop doing it. And this lady who's had the drug denied to her, well, she won't know it. She'll just die.
Yeah, well...
Because there won't be any other drugs either.
I'm not arguing the case for the lady, but what I would say is, why doesn't the National Health form its own drug company? You know, and then they could get rich off the profits.
Well...
And they could get themselves a licence, couldn't they?
They could, and
it's a good idea, isn't it, Alan?
Well, in the past, the National Health Service was at the forefront of drug development, and the government does put a lot of money, along with charities, into drug development, but not enough. And so in the end, I mean, we're blessed in Manchester in that we have some very, very good scientists in Manchester. Very good scientists. And Manchester University and the other universities about the place and other elements around here do some very, very fine work. But often, the only way they can get it funded is by getting a private company to fund their experiments in return for the product when it's resolved. And you might ask me, who brought that about? Why doesn't the government get it? And the answer is Margaret Thatcher.
Well, I'm no fan of Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher, a scientist herself, told the science community that you must get sponsors. You must get industry to pay for your endeavours.
Yeah.
So industry says, yeah, we'll pay for it, but when it's successful, we're having the profit.
I'm sure that if National Health took over the drug companies, it would be a damn good investment for this country. It must be. You know, there's such good profits in it. Why can't the profits go back into National Health?
Well, the profits are not always there. And you have to... It's that old phrase, Rita.
Well, yeah, £1,000 a tablet, Alan.
Well, yeah, but what about all the ones that failed? Imagine the newspapers if the government had spent £500 million researching a drug and eventually decided, actually, it's not worked. We're throwing it in the canal.
I agree with you, Alan, and I agree with what you're saying, but my argument then becomes... The drug companies are still making a profit in spite of what you said. Why can't the National Health make that profit?
Because the drug companies are international and the National Health Service is just round here.
Right, OK.
I mean,
it's a fair enough argument, but...
All right, Rita, have a good day. It is difficult. I don't know the solution to it. I really don't. Paul in Duckingfield. Hiya, Paul.
Oh, Alan, just a quick one. I think the gentleman that phoned earlier, he paid for 28 years and never get anything and stuff like that. I think people like him and myself, because I'm self-employed and I've worked all my life, I think sometimes what confuses us is we hear of young people coming, or elder people coming from a different country and having a life-saving operation over here. And then we wonder, well, if we can afford to pay for things like that out of the goodness of our heart, why can't we afford to pay for the lady's treatment?
Well, a lot of the people who come over here and have the treatment, the life-saving treatment you describe, a lot of those people are actually coming over here and having it paid for by their health insurance or indeed various other processes. It isn't always a free thing. Sometimes the hospitals and the doctors concerned will be interested in doing it because it develops their knowledge, and their knowledge is then used to serve the people of the NHS. But there have been some classic ones. There was a facial surgeon, a surgeon specialising in facial deformity, and there were television programmes made about it, about a young lad who had an awful facial deformity, was brought to Britain from, I think it was Brazil. He had a load of work done.
Now, Desmond Wilcox thing years ago.
Desmond Wilcox made similar programmes. I don't think that's the one I'm referring to, but that one will suffice, because what happened in that case was what are described as well-wishers paid for that treatment. And presumably the television company paid a fair bit towards it as well in the fees that they paid to film it. So it's not always cut and dried. Yes, they might be old, yes, they might be foreign, yes, they might be treated. It's not always the case that they're treated free gratis on the NHS. It is also the case that people go from the United Kingdom to other parts of the world and get treatment for free. Treatment that's not available here.
That's okay. I was just wondering, because a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people, and they think the same as me. You know, we don't understand why this happens and why some people seem to get things free that don't even live here. I'm not against that at all. I'm just against our people that deserve things getting everything they deserve. Because, as the gentleman earlier said, we all pay for things.
Well, I'll ask you the question then. Do you think the National Health Service should be, in financial terms, a bottomless pit where the money is just scooped out of a central pit to pay for everything that the doctors might want to prescribe?
No, because then they'd put our national insurance contributions up and we'd be paying for it in the long run anyway, wouldn't we?
Well, in that case, you agree that people should be let die because it's cheaper?
No, it can't be a bottomless pit, but, you know, if...
Well, Paul, you can't have the cake and the halfpenny.
No, I don't want the cake and the halfpenny.
You've either got to ration it or fund everything. Which do you want? If you ration it, someone has to decide who dies, and if you fund everything, somebody has to pay. You can't have both. It's an either or, mate.
No, I'm with you. I understand.
So which is it? Do we let people die because it's cheap? Well, I don't care. You raised it. The question is, do we let people die because it's cheaper, or do we treat them despite the cost?
Well, I'd treat them despite the cost and put the insurance up in that case.
OK. So you think it should be a bottomless pit and we just should pay whatever it takes?
Yeah.
All right, mate. Good on you.
And by the way...
Go on.
I'm looking for a new mobile phone. If I'm not joking. If you're Israel, give me a ring.
No, I won't be selling it. Thank you very much. I'd be in terrible trouble now, wouldn't I? Have a good day, Paul. Cheers, mate. I could have made a shilling there. I'm slipping up. 0161 228 2255. Brian says, if the child was abducted and is still alive, he's talking about Madeleine McCann, if the child was abducted and is still alive, then surely at some point she herself would become aware of who she really is and the events which occurred in her life. The child has an abnormality in one eye which makes recognition quite easy. At some point in the future, therefore, someone, or Madeleine herself, will recognise her. Because of this, if she has been taken, her abductor will be only too aware, and the reason for keeping her alive will diminish. That's from Brian, and I can't find a way of arguing with that, do you? I don't know any way of arguing with that. It's horrible, but it's the realities. Alan, the allocation of treatment is done by your postcode and not on a nationwide budgeting. Right, I think what you're saying, Kenny, you might have missed a word out in your text. Yes, you seem to be saying it should be done nationwide and not done by postcode. In the ideal world, you're probably right, but I don't know that you can do it nationwide because the facilities and skills are not available nationwide. The reality is that we almost always go to our local health provider, if you like, our local health service, our local health department, whatever it is. And because they are human beings, some of them are better than others, some are more skilled than others. We in Manchester have the Christie, which is, of course, one of the best cancer treating hospitals in the world. But not everybody with cancer in the northwest goes to Christie's. Some of them, most of them, are treated in their local hospitals. Now, the local hospitals all the ones that do cancer have oncologists. Some of them are brilliant, some of them are bloody brilliant, some of them are geniuses. And some of them aren't as good as that. It's the same with everything, whether you're driving instructors, whether you're journalists, broadcasters, police officers, plumbers. That's how it is. So it will always be on a postcode basis. don't know any other way of doing it, really. 0161 228 2255. Ivor says, maggots in a pair of slippers. Why not go one step further and have maggots in all slippers? This would have two benefits. All the other patients would no longer be jealous because they're maggot-free. Farm the maggots, sell them to angling shops, thus raising much-needed revenue for the NHS. Problem solved. And then he says, why separate income tax and national insurance if the money raised all goes into the same pot? Why not scrap one lot and let the staff concerned take voluntary retirement and let them live the life of Riley on their over-generous civil service pensions? Ivor, you might have hit on something there. What's your second name? Good idea? Ivor, good idea. Oh, shut up. 20 to 1. News headlines. Michelle Adamson.
The Conservatives are claiming that many of our hospitals are infested with vermin. Figures they've obtained show that West Pennine Acute Hospital Trusts, which cover Bury, Oldham, Rochdale and North Manchester, called in the pest controllers more than 350 times over a 2-year period. A police officer's been forced to resign from Greater Manchester Police after being found guilty of assault. 2 Britons have been arrested in Beijing for displaying Free Tibet banners near the Olympic Stadium. Manchester's weather, more rain this afternoon. Feeling quite warm though, highs of 22 Celsius.
How much does Tibet normally cost?
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
If you're using the M60 at the moment, you should have a clear run ahead of you. I've just checked the cameras between junction 22 at Failsworth all the way around towards junction 13 at Worsley, clockwise and anti-clockwise, all moving fairly well for the moment. However, we do have some disruption on the trains, I'm afraid, this hour. London Midland and Virgin train services are delayed up to 45 minutes between Birmingham New Street and London Euston due to signalling problems in the Rugby area. So make sure you check with National Rail inquiries before you travel. Don't forget, if you can update me further on the traffic situation where you are today, why not call in on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
How did the railways manage to organise all that crap at Rugby? It's always signalling in the Rugby area. Does it work everywhere else?
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Good afternoon. Manchester City owner Thaksin Shinawatra has admitted having talks to bring new funds into the club, but strongly denies trying to sell the Blues. The former Thai Prime Minister is still waiting to discover whether his £800 million of frozen assets will be released. Well, it's been reported in many of the morning newspapers that Shinawatra is ready to cut his losses and sell up at Eastlands. Well, I've spoken to Dr. Thaksin's media advisor Phil Hall this morning, and he tells me that investment talks have taken place, but are purely exploratory as he looks to continue the development into City's marketing and brand. Meanwhile, defender Vedran Chorluka is expected to complete his £7 million switch to Tottenham today. The Croatian is discussing personal terms with Spurs. Kevin Parker is the head of the official supporters club, and he believes it would be a mistake to let him go.
Certainly he was one of our best players last season. The fans are very happy with him. And I think the only reason that we could possibly be selling him is that the manager is looking to raise funds to sign other players, and that's not a great sign when all the indications were that when he came in, he would have a bag full of money to spend. You know, I hate to use it, but almost will, typical City, and the uncertainty is back.
Well, if that goes through, then Blues boss Mark Hughes will reportedly use the cash to bring Blackburn striker Roque Santa Cruz to Eastlands. He might be a little harder to prize away from Blackburn now, as Rovers have just signed his brother Julio on a 3-year deal. Tonight, City go to Celtic for a friendly, and Hughes believes it will provide huge opportunity to assess the strength of his playing staff ahead of the new season. Hughes will be hoping for more goals this evening. Only 2 were scored in the games at Hamburg and Stockport.
We've got a lot of strikers. Someone has to grab the initiative and show what they can do. I mean, in fairness, the young guys have made an impression. Certainly, Ched Evans during the pre-season games has certainly come on, and been pleased with what I've seen from him. And like I said, I mentioned Boji. We've got real hopes that he's going to come back and be bigger, faster and stronger.
Sir Alex Ferguson says he wants his new assistant manager in place by next month. Manchester United let Carlos Queiroz leave to take over as Portugal boss, and Sir Alex says we're no closer to finding an assistant manager. It's always hard to replace good men, and we're taking our time with it. United host Juventus for a friendly at Old Trafford this evening. That gets underway at 8 o'clock. Wigan manager Steve Bruce is weighing up the prospect of offering French striker Joel Thomas a contract. The 21-year-old was released by Kaiserslautern at the end of last season and played in the Latics win at Hibernian last night. Switzerland goalkeeper Pascal Zuberbühler has signed for Fulham on a one-year deal, and Rangers are set to miss out on a potential £12 million following last night's shock exit to FBK Kaunas in the Champions League qualifiers. In the cricket, it's day one of Lancashire's County Championship match with Sussex. To be blunt, it's been an awful start at Old Trafford. BBC Radio Manchester's Chris Malaband is there for us.
It's been Sussex's morning and no mistake. 37 for 4 Lancashire in the 23rd over, with Francois Duplessis battling gamely on 14 and with him Stephen Croft on 1. But in conditions that have been conducive to high-quality swing and seam bowling, Sussex's opening bowlers have taken full advantage, in particular Jason Lurie, who took 3 for 18 from his opening spell of 8 overs, picking up Lou Vincent for naught, Ian Sutcliffe first ball for the same score, and Paul Horton caught behind for 12. Since then, Stuart Law has also gone, caught by Matt Pryor off the bowling of Luke Wright for 9, as Lancashire have struggled to cope in conditions that have certainly helped the bowlers. Law's decision to bat first may be coming into question when Lancashire go in for lunch in 15 minutes' time, because they're in all sorts of trouble in their first innings, up 41 for 4.
Many thanks, Chris. We'll be live at Old Trafford throughout the afternoon, unfortunately. Steve Harmison and Stuart Broad have been recalled to the England side for the final test against South Africa at the Oval tomorrow. Ryan Sidebottom and Ravi Bopara have been left out. England will play 5 batsmen, with Ian Bell replacing former skipper Michael Vaughan at number 3. Lancashire's Andrew Flintoff will bat at 6. In rugby union, Sale Sharks take on Perpignan as part of the Challenge Vaccarin tournament in France. New signing David Doherty starts, as does Rory Lamont, who makes his comeback from a facial injury. And finally, the British Olympic Association has announced that Mark Foster will be the Team GB flag carrier at the opening ceremony on Friday. The 50 metres freestyle swimmer is 38 years old, one of the oldest athletes in this year's Games.
This is the Northwest's biggest sports station. This is BBC Radio Manchester.
Flintoff again, bowls a short ball to Scott. Oh, that is a most fantastic catch. St Helens have booked a return to Wembley Stadium.
No one covers more of Manchester sports, which is why we're the Northwest's biggest sports station. The all-new Manchester Sports, Saturday at 1. BBC Radio Manchester.
Everybody is very excited about it. Quite a lot of people are excited about the Olympic Games as well. If you're in Manchester and you're in the vicinity of Marks and Spencer's and the Triangle and all that gubbins, we have, of course, the BBC Dirty Great Big Picture thingy on the side of the Triangle. And much of the Olympic Games will be on there, so you'll be able to see it. That's nice. Alan, I work in the pharmaceutical industry and am fully aware that we are seen as the baddies. But the government are happy to let us get on with the development of drugs and take the risks and profits if they make profits because of the enormous costs. It costs an average of £200 million to develop a drug, and only 1 in 100 molecules that are developed become drugs. Add to that the astronomical overheads of running an organisation, you can see why the government leaves it to us. So there you are, Lee in Liverpool with that point of view. Val in Lee. Hi, Val.
Hi, Alan.
What can we do for you? And you, ma'am.
I've just been hearing about these people on your programme saying about allocation of drugs in the National Health and the money in the National Health.
Yes.
And I was reading in my paper this morning about a local primary care in Yorkshire that's sponsoring kids to the tune of £4,000 each to go to a fat camp because they're overweight. Now, I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's a waste of NHS money. It's costing somewhere in the region of £4,000 each, and they're in this Rotherham, it is, Rotherham PCT, are investing £750,000 to help these youngsters lose some weight. Now, what's wrong with the parents of these youngsters? Stop these kids eating all the rubbish that they do eat, therefore getting fat. I don't think it's up to the NHS or anybody else I think it's up to the parents, and they should take control. What do you think?
I think you're right and wrong simultaneously. Because it's my constant cop-out. You're absolutely right, and I think I said the other day that their parents should be taken to one side and horsewhipped, because they are the only people to blame in this equation.
Correct.
But we then have to go back to the kids. The kids are big fat blubber lads. What are we to do with them? Well, let us pretend that we don't care. Well, fine. But if they stay blubber lads, it's going to cost the National Health Service a massive amount of money treating their various ailments in the coming years.
I agree.
So in the end, from the NHS's point of view, it's better that we get
but
them...
I wonder if it works.
Well...
I mean, what happens at the end of the 6 weeks camp? Do they go home and all stay on salads, etc.? I very much doubt it.
Well, I don't know whether it works. I know people that have been to... not fat camps, because they're a fairly American idea, but I know people that have gone on to, well, they've gone to health farms, and getting to the health farm has not really done them much good, but because they weren't learning anything new. They were grown-ups, they knew why they were fat. But with kids, if you can actually at the fat farm teach them a new way of living, you might be able to get them past it, so that you are treating
maybe, but
the
I think
symptom by...
cause is the parents. I mean, I used to live on a school route, if you like, primary, and the number of children walking up there in the morning with the parents, munching crisps and drinking soft drinks at 8:45 in the morning was disgraceful. I mean, that's all down to the parents. Why can't they get up, make the kids, if only just put a few cornflakes in a bowl? That didn't take much effort. But no, they would sooner give in, and especially give in to these kids that are whinging and whining. I mean, you see it all the time now, children moaning and groaning, and the parents give in because it's the easy option, when it isn't really in the long run. It's not the best option.
Well, quite. It's the easiest, not the best.
No.
I don't know. What have you got to offer in terms of getting the parents... Well, there's a number of things. First of all, you've got to get the parents educated, and I don't mean book learning, I mean aware of the... crisps used to be a treat. Now they're a foodstuff.
That's right. Yeah.
Pies used to be foodstuff for men who did heavy labour. Very few people do that now. So it's not just entirely the parents' fault. I'd still have them horsewhipped, but it's not entirely the parents' fault. There does need to be some re-education.
Definitely, yes. But I still think it's a total waste. And when you see people being refused life-giving help with cancer drugs, and on the other hand, you're paying £4,000 to send a fat kid to camp to teach them not to eat rubbish.
Well, let me offer you another way of looking at it. Which do you think the National Health Service should spend its money on? Re-educating kids who might get a better life out of it, or giving the money to somebody who'll be dead in 3 months anyway?
Well, as somebody who's surviving cancer at the moment, my option would be to go for the person.
All right, let's go with that.
I've got a vested interest.
Haven't you just yet? we all in the end vote according to our own systems. Good on you, Val.
Okay.
Have a good day. Bye now. 0161 228 2255. We all pay the same national insurance, so why should we receive different treatments depending on where we live? It seems unjust that a drug which is available in Cheshire is not available in Salford. That's Adam in Burnage. Well, what you're not doing with that, and no, we don't pay all the same national insurance, although we pay it at the same rate, but we pay different amounts according to our earnings and all that sort of thing, but never mind, let's not dwell. I know what you mean, so we pay it at the same rate. But you can't have identical services. It might, but I don't know this to be the case. Salford has got a major problem. Salford has a massive, massive health problem. It's one of the unhealthiest places on earth to live. And they spend in Salford, now listen to the words I'm using, in Salford, the National Health Service spends billions, actually billions of pounds, trying to get people who will die young, because that's what you do in Salford, to live longer. The health service in Surrey spends less money trying to get people educated in such a way and to change their lifestyle in such a way, because they already live a lot longer than the people of Salford. You cannot have identical spending plans for the health service around the country, because the health of the nation isn't the same around the country, and we know that in Greater Manchester, because we have one of the lowest in the United Kingdom, one of the lowest lifespans. Now, I'm going to live to 100, so screw all them people that die of a heart attack at 45. Well, no, I don't believe that. But that's the system you're advocating if you say we should have the same amount of money everywhere. Terence in Tilsley. Hiya, Terence.
Hi, Alan. Right, Alan. I had a girlfriend who suffered from manic depression, and she died in 2007. I'm not going to mention any names, but
thank you.
Basically, right, what it is, yeah, I found it that there was alternative medication in America that could have helped her, and I did order it and all, but it was too late, obviously. I found out that's interesting, there's a Dr. Abram Hoffer in...
You said you weren't going to give any names.
No, well, not names, but there's a doctor in Canada who's treated, schizophrenic patients, and he's still in his 90s through orthomolecular and nutrition. And basically, the cure rate is 90% for each of these patients that he's cured from schizophrenia. And to put it mildly...
Terence, there are often people who are able, or at least claim, some are able, some just claim, to treat conditions that others can't treat.
Yeah. But this is what I'm saying. The orthomolecular nutrition... As I've been doing a lot of research into it, if the NHS...
Well, let me ask you where you did that research.
I did this research not just on the internet, but in numerous scientific stuff that I got from out from the universities and all, and I got from other sources as well. And to put it mildly, basically, I found it about the drug laws in 1968 that the Medicines Act... in 1968 forbidded any substance or combination of substances presented for treating or preventing a disease in human beings. And it says, or any substance or combination of substances which may be used in a human being with view to restoring or correcting or modifying physiological function. So basically what it's saying is, in its broadest sense, it says it means that water, which clearly modifies and physiologically restores function and restores body's water balance, could be deemed a medicine. Well, now, that seems to me...
You're right in that, yes, it could. It hasn't been thus far. But just at the risk of being very, very silly with you, we have discovered recently, in the past 12 months, that the bloke also from America, who about 10 years ago said everybody should drink 6 litres of water a day or they'll be unhealthy, has now been shown to be suspect, or his advice suspect, because we've actually got the situation in the United Kingdom where people are drinking too much water and as a result are diluting their natural bodily salts and making them ill. So to pick on water was probably unfortunate.
Yeah.
We have a similar thing going on with Europe at the moment, and the regulation of what have for many, many years been used by all kinds of individuals, including charlatans, and herbal medicines and the like, and they're now beginning to fall under the regulation. But just because somebody's been using it for 100 years doesn't mean that we should allow it to continue to be used. And we must, if we are going to treat people with chemicals, we must protect people from those who would sell them snake oil.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is what I'm saying, yeah. But what I'm trying to get across to you, Alan, is let's take, for instance, with depression.
We haven't got time to take, for instance, but we will have after 1 o'clock. So what I'm going to do, because I interrupted you there, Terence, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk to you, if you're OK with that, after the 1 o'clock news, which is almost upon us. So put your phone down and we'll ring you back again after the 1 o'clock news. Seems only fair.
Our congestion conversation continues.
But have you had your info pack through your letterbox?
If you want to know more,
join Diane and John tomorrow from 6.
I've had my info pack through my letterbox, and frankly, it was not much. I weren't that impressed with it. But then how much information can you take? A bit more would have done.
5.1 FM, DAB digital radio, and the World Wide Web. This is Manchester.
BBC Radio Manchester.
At 1 o'clock, the kidney cancer drug Sutent is provided to a woman in Salford by an anonymous donor. The dead man who lay undiscovered in his house for 2 years.
And Lancashire are 4 wickets down before lunch against Sussex.
Well, this afternoon the weather is unsettled with outbreaks of rain, which could be heavy at times. Top temperatures 23 Celsius.
Dead for 2 years. I bet he had maggots in his slippers.
Good afternoon, I'm Michelle Adamson. A woman from Salford has started taking the kidney cancer drug Sutent after a generous donor agreed to pay for it. Last week, Salford Primary Care Trust refused to pay for the drug for the 3rd time because of its high costs. The money was donated anonymously yesterday. Jean's daughter, Kathy, says it's been a tough time for the family, but they had no intention of giving up the fight to get her the drug.
It has been hard, but we've just all stuck together.
Yeah.
We're a close family, we're a strong family, and we're all there for each other, and we had no intention of giving up. And if this person had to come forward, we still wouldn't have been giving up now.
Police in Trafford are hunting a lone gunman who committed 2 armed robberies in a matter of minutes on Sunday, then struck again on Monday. The man, who's described as mixed race and about 6'1", targeted the village service station, the spa and the co-op in Flixton. A 70-year-old man lay dead in his Lancashire home for more than 2 years before anyone reported him missing, police have said today. Brian Dean's body was found lying fully clothed on his bed and almost mummified when officers broke down the door of his home near Accrington. Unopened letters dating back to 2006 were found piled behind the front door. His bills had continued to be paid by direct debit. Police are trying to trace next of kin, but Mr. Dean isn't thought to have had any family or close friends. A woman has been thrown onto a railway line after asking 2 youths to stop smoking on a station platform. The woman suffered burns and a suspected broken collarbone in the incident this morning in Kent. A police officer has been forced to resign from Greater Manchester Police after being found guilty of assault. 36-year-old Anthony Lang from Laneburn Road in Moston was convicted earlier this year after an incident with a prisoner at Rochdale Police Station. A man's been arrested after a woman was sexually assaulted in Lee last weekend. The 23-year-old victim managed to answer her phone and scream for help as it rang during the attack in the early hours of Sunday morning. Police are still appealing for witnesses to the incident, which happened on a path off Wigan Road. Manchester United supporters will get their first proper look at the team parading the Champions League and Premiership trophies that they won last season. If you remember, there was never a big homecoming parade for the club in the end, after the trouble caused when Rangers fans came to town. The trophies will be brought out at tonight's friendly against Juventus at Old Trafford, which will cost £10 to get in. But supporter Dennis Breen from Cheadle is angry.
Why can't they open the ground for free? I mean, just give something back to the fans now and again. It's a shame we couldn't have the parade. You know, that time's passed. We should have had that, you know, when they got back from Moscow. But open the ground for free, do something for the fans for a change.
Phil Townsend is Manchester United's communications director.
We've got a fee to pay to Juventus. We've got our own cost to pay on opening the stadium. We were conscious of the fact that people have to pay to get in, and that's why the prices are as low as £10.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Will Perry.
Well, we'll start with the cricket. Lancashire will be very glad to get off that pitch at Old Trafford as they go in for lunch. They've had a session to forget in their county championship match with Sussex. Chris Malaban has the latest.
It's been a morning of struggle for the Red Rose at Old Trafford. 59 for 4 after 27 overs at lunch. Francois Duplessis battling gamely on 19 and with him Stephen Croft on 18. A difficult morning though for Lancashire, who won the toss and elected to bat first in humid and overcast conditions. Jason Lurie with 3 for 18 ripped out the Lancashire top order as Vincent and Sutcliffe both made naught. Horton made 12 and Stuart Law was picked up by Luke Wright for 9. It's been the visitors' morning. Lancashire at lunch, 59 for 4.
Well, if you can bear listening, we'll be live at Old Trafford throughout the afternoon. England have made 2 changes to their team for the final test against South Africa at the Oval tomorrow. Ryan Sidebottom is replaced by Stuart Broad and Steve Harmison comes in for the former captain Michael Vaughan. Manchester City owner Thaksin Shinawatra has admitted having talks to bring new funds into the club, but strongly denies selling the Blues, or trying to sell the Blues, that is. Shinawatra's media advisor says talks have taken place, but are purely exploratory as he looks to continue the development into City's marketing and brand. And finally, Sir Alex Ferguson wants his new assistant manager in place by next month. The Reds boss says it's always hard to replace good men, and we're going to take our time about it.
BBC Radio Manchester satellite weather with Heather Stotts.
Well, this afternoon is looking grey and overcast, and the rain that we've seen around from time to time this morning will become more widespread, and it could be locally heavy, and there's the risk of hearing a rumble of thunder as well. Top temperatures warm though, 23 Celsius.
According to me wires service, the Duke of Edinburgh, poor old beggar, has prostate cancer. He was 87 and he was diagnosed with the condition when he was being treated in a London hospital for a chest infection. Now that's thorough.
Lunchtimes belong to Beswick.
Allan Beswick.
BBC Radio Manchester.
Men of a certain age, including mine, the last thing you want to see when you go for any kind of medical is the doctor putting a glove on. Anyway, it's just gone 1:05. We were talking to Terence in Tilsley about the drugs for, or the treatment of, manic depression. Terence, sorry, we cut you off in your prime there. The news comes and bites us on the hour every so often. If you can treat the news, you'll be all right. Yeah. Anyway, what have you got for us? Go on.
Right, basically, what I was going to say is, there was a nutrient that people could take for depression basically it's called SAMe, S-A-M-E, right? It's called S-adenosine methane. And basically in 1999 there was a doctor, I'm not mentioning no names again, found that this was the most effective antidepressant for basically treating depression. It's had over 100 blind trial tests to prove its effectiveness, and then the EU basically is put it this way: it says it's a vital natural substance that helps keep your brain working. And in 1999, the magazine Newsweek reported it's effective against depression. It hasn't been found to cause the side effects associated with prescription antidepressants, and it tends to work more quickly. But this doctor, formerly of the UK Institute of Psychiatry, but now working in the United States where laws on nutritional medicine are less restrictive, agrees same is one of the most effective safe nutrients for treating depression. And in fact, it's that highly effective that the EU banned it. They classified it as a medicine and banned it.
Well, that's an interesting image of the EU you have there. What do you think? What do you think it is about the EU that wants people to suffer from depression?
Well, put it this way. It's not that they want people to suffer from depression, but the drug companies have a massive stranglehold on the NHS and doctors. And basically, as in 1968, when the 40 words published in 1968 gave the pharmaceutical industry a near monopoly on medicine in the UK in exchange for a yearly payment of millions of pounds. And it says the words may vary elsewhere, but the basic principle has been applied around the world. So basically, from all what I've studied and researched, that basically what it's saying here is there are stuff out there which are more effective than pharmaceutical drugs and actually treat and can cure illnesses, but But basically, the monopoly and stranglehold that the drug companies have on the NHS and doctors is absolutely astronomical.
Well, there are... I mean, I agree with you in some respects here. In the respect that the stranglehold that the treatment and drugs organisations, we'll call them both because it's not just drugs, but the treatment and drugs organisations, the stranglehold is ferocious.
Tell me about it.
There is another difficulty, though, and it is this. There are an awful lot of individuals and people who claim all sorts of things for treatments. I interviewed a bloke many years ago, must have been 25, getting on 30 years ago. I interviewed a bloke who'd just published a book, and it was all about treating cancer with a trio of herbs, and he maintained that this would cure all sorts of cancers. That was his book, and I can't remember the title of the book. I interviewed two people about the same time. The other one turned out to be a murderer who was also flogging a book about cancer, but this bloke was selling a book and flogging a book that talked about these three herbs being combined in a particular way, and he gave the formula in the book and everything. The book was a massive seller. I don't think it made #1 in the bestsellers, but I think it made #1 in the, what you might call, textbook bestsellers. So it did quite well. And it's yet to be replicated. His trials have yet to be replicated. Now, the problem there is the National Health Service, because it's huge, can't be sufficiently agile to deal with every single idea that's put forward.
Yeah.
And it can't, in any other forum, rely on somebody else's research, because people can't be trusted.
Oh, yeah, I agree with you.
What are they to do?
But like you say, with the drug companies, how do we know that these drugs are not independently tested by independent scientific people? And this is one of the problems.
Well, you hit on another very sensitive area. It is sometimes the case that drug companies have gone so far down the multi-million... I mean, we had, I think it was Lee in Liverpool telling us, £200 million per molecule. So there they are, they've come up with this molecule, they think it cures this, they get 3/4 the way down the line, they've spent 175 million quid on it, and suddenly they find they've got a bad result.
Yeah.
So what do?
Yeah.
Well, what they do is they decide, we'll abandon it. But just occasionally, one or two say, well, let's just keep going. They must do. They must do. Some have been found guilty of it, but they must do it because that's the nature of humanity.
Well, like I say, what's interesting also, Alan, and you'll find really interesting, is there's a sleeping pill on the market, and I can't mention the name because I don't want them suing me or anything.
Well, I've got worse news for you. They might sue me and all.
Yeah, well, and it's basically, it failed to get licensed in America because of cancer on animal studies.
Well,
but
again...
over here, the medical health regulatory authorities have licensed it for treating sleep insomnia. And it's like,
indeed,
what?
but
the hell?
If we are to... what we really need is honest companies. Well, OK, we're not going to get that. We don't have any way of knowing which are the honest ones and which are the nasty ones in advance. So,
I have an idea, but I can't say anything.
I have absolutely no idea who's good and who's bad. I have to go on the basis of, well, you're telling me these things, you might be making this up on the spot. I've no idea, no way of knowing, Terence.
Well, I wouldn't be making stuff like this up on the spot,
Terence, the one... I'm not accusing you of this, but the one thing a liar tells you is he's not lying. Otherwise, he's screwed, isn't he, really?
Well, yeah.
If you started off by saying, look, Alan, this stuff I'm about to tell you is a pack of lies, but it'll be entertaining.
Yeah.
So, if you were lying, you wouldn't tell me. And if I suggested to you might be lying, you wouldn't say, it's a fair cop, Alan. You'd carry on lying. So, I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying that that's the way it has to be, and it's the same with drugs. Britain has its standard, along with America has its standard, for assessing whether drugs should be used. Now, you're telling me there's a drug that they've allowed in the United Kingdom that's been banned in America.
It failed to get licensed.
I have to tell you, the reverse is more often the case.
Yeah.
It is more often the case that drugs, and people come on here and tell me, this drug's available in America. In fact, thinking of somebody, I was just trying to think of somebody who might have done that recently. There's a bloke called Terence in Tilsley did that recently. There's a drug being used in America that's not allowed over here. You see my dilemma?
Yeah.
Good to talk to you, Terence. 0161 228 2255. Jimmy in Trafford Park. Hiya, Jimmy.
Hi, good afternoon there, Alan. Yeah. I heard you earlier on, by the way, and I think you're wrong, but I think that woman, that poor woman in Salford, she deserves to be treated on the National Health Service. At the end of the day, Alan...
What are you basing that on, Jimmy?
But I'm telling you what I'm going to base it on.
Oh, sorry, my apologies.
Sorry. What I'm telling you is because at the end of the day, life is a lottery, and she took part in the British lottery when she started work. She started paying her tax and National Health Service contributions, and how many umpteen millions of people have paid in and died without ever needing to see a doctor, never mind of life-saving surgery or even expensive life-prolonging drugs. It's all right, Alan, for champagne socialists like yourself to say hard lines, Mrs. The tablets are too expensive and you don't deserve them. I think that's terrible. The National Health Service pays billions of... Alan, come on, you know yourself, the National Health Service pays billions every year to foreigners, treating foreigners free of charge. It's well known as the International Health Service. And until we stop, and we could just pay that woman's drugs with stopping treating these foreigners. And you know that, by the way. Even the government admits it.
Jimmy, I'm always reluctant to let it pass when people tell me my opinions and tell me what I know. It always strikes me as being rather clever of them.
Oh, I'm not clever at all. That's why I'm sitting in a lorry.
Because sometimes I don't even know my opinions myself. So telling me what I know doesn't help. We come back eventually to... You can argue that the woman deserves the drugs. That's a very simple argument to put, and I can join you in that. Of course she deserves them. But it's not about deserving. It's about, from the point of view of the Salford Health Trust, whether they've got the money. Well, they haven't got the money to pay for everything they'd like to pay for. They haven't. There may be ways of improving that by banning foreigners, getting free treatment and all the rest of it, but they have to live in the world in which they live. Now, in the world in which they live, which is not the ideal world, Salford Health Authority have to decide whether to treat this woman with a very expensive drug or somebody else. It's either or. It isn't everybody gets what they want.
Yeah, well, this lady happens to be paying into the National Health Service, and as I said, the national life is a lottery, and her ticket came up badly, and she deserves...
But Jimmy, you're sidestepping the question. I'll put the question to you very, very plainly.
Oh, yeah,
very plainly.
That, yeah.
The amount of money it's going to cost, £3,000 a month. For that, you can do a hip replacement.
Yeah, from a Nigerian lady from Nigeria.
Jimmy.
Yeah.
The Salford Health Authority have this choice. Now, you might want them to have a different one, but they have this choice. Do we give the woman £3,000 a month for the drugs? She'll maybe live 3 months, it'll cost £9,000, and then she'll be dead. I don't wish her that, but that's the stark choice sometimes. Or do they give 3 people each a hip replacement who will have another 15, 20 years of pain-free life? Which do they decide? Let's say she lives for 12 months, then it'll be 12 people. Let's say she lives for 2 years, then it'll be 24 people. Let's say she lives a week, then it'll be none.
So, okay, then. So
what's the choice?
The choice is we've got to look after our own people for the better.
No, Jimmy, let me...
You won't allow them to get a chance
I will give you the chance. You told me about the Nigerians a few moments ago.
Yeah, go on,
my question is this. The Salford Health Authority doesn't have the opportunity to say, give her the money we would have given to a Nigerian. They have to deal with what's in front of them. Which choice would you make?
The choice I would go for, I'd treat the lady simply because until the government stops squandering money, billions of pounds in wars, etc., that money could be diverted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jimmy, what would you then say to the 3 people who over the next 3 months won't be able to have a hip replacement because she spent the money, or the health service has spent the money giving her drugs to delay her death? What would you say to those 3 people?
What a predicament for these people at
That's
night
the predicament they're
yourself.
in. So
Of
what
course
would you
it
do?
is.
So what would you do?
That woman should be given the drugs because
And let the
if
other
it was
buggers
your-
the other buggers leap.
Well, the other people will still be there, and at the end of the day, when the government has got so much billions of pounds to waste on other stupid wars, etc., then that is, and etc., that is why I think it is ridiculous. I mean, it's okay for yourself and all these people at Billy Bragg, multi-millionaires. They can afford to do their own thing, and these are the socialists. You went on about the Daily Mail. You buy the Daily Mail to always read it to see what the fascists are up to. What kind of nonsense is that? Why do you buy the Daily Mirror to see what the communists or socialists are up to?
Well, I buy them as well.
Well, they don't. They don't seem to be speaking up for people.
Jimmy, what I said was I always read the Daily Mail first, so I know what the fascists think. I didn't say I bought it. The BBC buys it, and I read all the others as well. But do go on.
Yeah, but you never
In fact,
mentioned
you buy
about the Daily Mirror and the Morning Star that you probably get.
I don't get the Morning Star anymore, and I wish I did. I used to get it.
You're a plastic socialist.
I'm not a socialist at all.
Oh, you're not? Oh,
Good God, no.
I thought you were a communist then. You must
well, now which you accusing me of? Communism or socialism?
Well,
They're not the same, you know.
No, I know that. Sorry, very similar bedfellows.
I'm particular about my bedfellows.
Yes. Well, save billions of pounds and stop wars and get out of these ridiculous, silly wars. Save billions. Stop foreigners use the National Health Service.
I wonder how many people, they wouldn't say it about the National Health Service, but I wonder how many people in 1939 said, you know what, I think we spend far too much on the army. Have a good day, Jimmy. 0161 228 2255. It's 1:20 and we got the news headlines with Michelle Adamson.
A teenager from Trafford is seriously ill in a Greek hospital following a moped accident. Her family now face a huge bill to bring her home after her insurance refused to pay up. A woman is lucky to be alive, according to police, after being pushed off the platform onto train tracks at a Kent station. It happened near Dartford after she asked 2 youths to stop smoking. A 70-year-old man lay dead in his Lancashire home for more than 2 years before anyone reported him missing. Brian Dean's body was found lying fully clothed on his bed and almost mummified when officers broke down the door of his home near Accrington. Manchester's weather unsettled this afternoon with outbreaks of rain, some of which will be heavy at times. Highs of 23 Celsius.
I can never work things out. Does that mean he was 70 when he died?
BBC Radio Manchester, 2020 traffic.
Well, traffic slow on the M66 heading southbound at the moment, heading towards Manchester because of a collision involving a lorry and a car. Now, it blocked the whole carriageway for a short time, but both vehicles have now been moved to the hard shoulder between 2 Bury and 3 Hollins. Matrix signs are set at 40 miles per hour and all lanes have been reopened, but the car's still facing the wrong way, so do take care past the scene. Aside from that, though, generally other routes seem to be moving fairly well. I can't see of any major delays on camera on the M56, for instance, but if you are using the trains heading towards London Euston, be aware that delays of up to 45 minutes can be expected on certain parts of the track. But I have been told fairly recently that services between Manchester Piccadilly and Liverpool Lime Street have been suspended towards London Euston for the time being because of some signalling problems in the Rugby area. And don't forget, if you can update me further, make sure you call in on the travel line, which is 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
2020 traffic means you get an update every 20 minutes through the day.
BBC Radio Manchester.
A very good day to you. How are you? 0161 228 2255. If you've got something to say, you're more than welcome to say it. David says, Alan, at today's prices, a good, honest, hard-working person would receive about £1 million in wages over 50 years at £20,000. Surely when it comes to treating people for illness, this should be borne in mind. And unless they're going to contribute or have already contributed enough to justify the treatment, why should we as a species want to pay it out. Just a thought. Very few of us would say we want to go, but it is coming to all of us, and should we not see it as the greatest gift anyone can give to all of those who are left to carry on what we've tried to do, says David. OK. I'm sure there was a point in there. I didn't quite grasp it myself, but that's not a first by any stretch of the imagination. And Chris in Hayfield says, you haven't included another alternative, the abolition of the NHS. The NHS has no moral right to exist because the money taken to run such has been plundered from the taxpayer. Why don't you ask the real question? Should we abolish the NHS? Instead of basing your question on the altruistic collectivist premise, which leaves the existence of the NHS without challenge. Come on, Alan, let's get to the crux of the issue. All right, Chris, there's the question. Should we abolish the NHS? Just do away with it. Say, there you are, NHS, thank you very much, you had a good run at it. We're privatising the lot. Or we're just doing away with it and let the devil take the hindmost, presumably. This idea of taxing everybody to fund the needs of the few, and it still is a few by comparison, or it wouldn't work, it's just a modern idea. It's only been around for 60 years. So what's the fuss? Should we abolish the NHS? You tell me. 0161 228 2255. Dave in Birkenhead. Hiya, Dave.
Hiya. Alan, I'm living with multiple sclerosis. Yeah? I was on drugs that were costing the NHS somewhere in the region of about £12,000 a year, which I injected daily. But the comment that's just been made about why should the many pay for you, I'm actually still working with a disease that I don't know where I'm going to be tomorrow. I could be still working perfectly tomorrow. I could be in a wheelchair.
Yep.
Now,
and indeed back out of it in 6 months' time.
Yeah.
Rather bizarrely.
It's one of those things, you know, multiple sclerosis is a terrible, terrible disease because it's the unknown that's so bad about it.
Yeah.
With the postcode lottery on drugs, the best thing that ever happened was when the government decided that everybody who met a criteria could have this drug, and the drug is on what's called a risk-sharing scheme. I don't know if you've heard of this.
I have, yes.
Where the drug company is prepared to pay a part of the cost of it. You know, you can't do that with somebody who's got a terminal illness. The NHS has got a limited budget, so just where do they spend it? Like I say, I'm very happy that I'm getting a pretty good whack out of what I paid in.
Yeah.
For the 30-odd years I was working. Well, I am still working.
And still paying in.
I'm still paying in quite a lot. In fact, too damn much, but that's another story.
We all think that. There's no... You're not alone in that, Dave. You whine all you like, you're getting no sympathy here. Go on.
The point I'm trying to make, Alan, is you've got a budget, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And somebody somewhere has got to decide how that budget is spent.
That's the difficulty.
And that's where the hard part is. Who gets it? I know a little girl who's got a disease, Niemann-Pick's disease. She's got to be lucky if she makes it to her 20s. And she's on a drugs trial at the moment that's something like £5,000 a year. But if that can get a child from 5 to 20 with a decent standard of living, should she not have it? But by the same token, why should she have it? Why should I have it? What it's costing for me, like you say, could do a lot of hip replacements. So somebody somewhere has to make these terrible, terrible decisions about who gets what.
Who do you think should make that decision? We can't allow the patients to make it because none of them, very few of them will say, don't give it me, give it him.
Yeah.
So who makes that decision?
The primary trust, basically.
So they've
got an amount of money to spend, unless there is a directive like there is with multiple sclerosis from the government.
Well, OK, one of the things that's been said in the case of this particular lady and her drug, and it's unfortunate that we're talking about her as if she was you know, just anybody. She's a human being, for crying out loud, and is entitled to her privacy. But the dilemma is not unique to her, so we can deal with the dilemma. You say that the Health Trust should make the decision, but the Health Trust are people in suits. They're accountants and managers.
Yeah.
But of course, the decision about whether the treatment, be it drug or anything else, the treatment would be beneficial is a medical decision.
Yeah.
So what you're saying, and what applies at the moment, is that the medical people say, yes, this will help this person.
Yeah.
And the person in a suit says, that's all very well,
but we can't afford it.
But we're not paying for it.
Yeah.
And you say that's how it should be.
I have to see a consultant every year.
Yeah.
To make sure that I still meet the criteria for this drug.
Yes.
So the consultant makes the decision that I meet the criteria for the drug. He then passes the information to the PCT.
But the criteria is quite interesting, because the criteria is not made by the doctor. The criteria is established by negotiation between the government's representatives and the drug company's representatives.
Yeah, you've got the NICE guidelines.
Well, the NICE guidelines would be if it was for general treatment, but this scheme you're on that you mentioned, I've forgotten the name of it, but the scheme that you're on...
The risk-sharing scheme.
The risk-sharing scheme, that's actually a negotiated scheme between the government's agents and the pharmaceutical companies' agents, and they each gain something. The NHS or the government gains treatment for patients who otherwise wouldn't get it, and the drugs company gets another strand, if you like, another way of administering and dissipating that drug.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if they can do it for MS, why can't they do it for other diseases?
Well, they can and do it for other diseases, but in order for it to be available, the drugs companies have to be prepared to tango, as it were. And they're not always prepared to tango, because they don't always need to tango. There would be no need of this scheme if I mean, this is the most stupid thing.
If there was a bottomless pit of money.
Well, there would be no need of the scheme if there was no need of the scheme. The scheme comes in to deal with a set of circumstances that are, frankly, on their own unacceptable.
Yeah,
and I don't know the answer.
You couldn't have a risk-sharing scheme where you've got a terminal illness, because eventually...
There's no risk.
There's no risk.
No. Although I believe there are... I'm trying to remember where I read it, but I think there is one such scheme on... You see, the problem with cancer is they only ever talk about life extending. So there is one such scheme with a life extending drug, but it's not life extending by a few months. It's actually life extended by quite a long way. But you can. But cancer, because they never talk about cure, they only ever talk about remission. Much the same with your own condition.
Yeah.
There's no cure for you. I'm not shocking you when I say you will die with MS. You may not die of it, but you'll die with it.
That is the only thing that is certain with MS. It won't kill you.
There's a friend of mine. I have two friends that I know have MS. I say that carefully because there are others who may have it who have not yet been diagnosed, of course. But I have two friends who have MS, and one of them is currently taking part in the blind drugs trial of a derivative of cannabis.
Sativex.
Well, I don't know which one it is.
I shouldn't have said that, should I?
Well, it doesn't matter. Nobody's getting offended by it, but there is a blind drugs trial going on presently.
I'm actually trying to get on that trial.
The lad's after some weed.
Well, unfortunately, Alan, you don't roll it up.
No, indeed, you. Well,
put it in a pie.
There's you've far too much experience in this area, Dave. But I mean, you will have spoken to people, I suspect, who have used the aforementioned substance. What do they say? Have you tried it?
I haven't.
No.
I spoke to, I mean, I'm getting on quite a bit. I'm in me early 40s plus 10.
It's one way of delivering it. Yeah, go on.
And I was speaking to a young lady who was only in her teens. And she said that the best thing she could do to get relief from the pain she was in, the neurological pain, was roll the joint and sit and quietly get stoned. Now, if that works for you, great. Personally, I haven't tried it.
But that's not treatment, that's escapism, isn't it? And there's nothing wrong with escapism. We all do it, whether it's playing rugby or doing that. I mean...
But they do say that this derivative of cannabis acts very, very well in spasticity. Now, again, that's a horrible, horrible word that's used, spasticity, because everybody thinks of, you know, people that are deformed and what have you. I mean, to look at me, you wouldn't know there was anything wrong with me, other than I walk with a bit of a lisp. But like I say, tomorrow morning, that could be a wheelchair.
Yeah, well, quite, yes.
So, you know, you count your blessings. But the reason I won't get involved in any trials with any drugs is somebody somewhere prior to me has done the same.
Yeah.
And I would like to pass that on to people who follow me. I mean, eventually, there'll be a cure for MS.
Well, eventually, but we have to wonder about when.
Yeah.
They're not close, are they? They're not, in terms of cure?
10 years, they think.
10 years?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
That's what's bandied about. Or they'll be close to it in 10 years. I mean,
the final step, yes, close. Close can be.
There's so much going on research-wise, and you know you've got to say thank you to all the people who donate money to the MS Society and MS charities to fund the.
Well, I used to be what would you call me? A patron. I don't know what I was. But I was one of the faces on the letter headings of Crack MS, a charity in Blackpool, and the president was one Les Dawson.
Yeah.
And I may never forgive the swine, because he shafted me at a dinner once to raise money. Absolutely shafted me. He was supposed to do an after-dinner speech, and I was there to introduce him at this dinner in Blackpool with all his bloody cronies. And Dawson turns up for the sound check with a big scarf round his neck and everything, and I'm not going to try and do his voice, but he did a croaky Les Dawson voice. He says, Alan, I can't do it tonight. He said, my voice is knackered, and I've got to record 3 blankety blanks tomorrow in Manchester or wherever. You'll have to do it. And I said, come on, Les, they've paid £100 a ticket to hear you speak, and a little fat bloke off the wireless gets up. You're going to be right peed off.
You can turn your radio on every day.
That's right. He said, come on, lad, it's for charity. Get your act together, get it done. You know, you said you're in the entertainment business, get on with it. So they were bloody great. So anyway, we all sit down, we have our dinner, and he's croaking away in the background. And I stand up and say, ladies and gentlemen, I'm supposed to be introducing Les Dawson, but he's got a bad throat tonight. He's got 3 blankety blanks to record tomorrow. And I got halfway into my first story and the swine started heckling me. Absolutely destroyed me. It was the funniest I've ever been, but only because of him. He was brilliant. He was so funny.
Yeah, I wouldn't pay money to listen to you.
No, indeed, neither would I, mate, don't worry. But they'd paid £100 for Les Dawson, and for a few seconds they thought they were getting me. He shafted me, the swine. But there you are, that's Les for you. Yeah, absolutely. And they made a fortune that night because of Les.
Smashing.
Cracking bloke. Anyway, good to talk to you, Dave.
Yeah,
have a good day.
Enjoyed that conversation. Thanks, Alan.
Cheers, have a belter. 0161 228 2255. Well, the question's out there. Nobody's picked up on it. The NHS. Why don't we just do away with it? Just do away with it. Malcolm in Offerton says, our NHS is probably the greatest asset and largest employer that this country has. Nye Bevin would be spinning in his grave were he to hear the fascist crap spouted today by the majority of people who would not be alive if not for the care they've received from the maternity services available to all. From 1934 to 1937, a young child in hospital care cost his parents the equivalent of a 3-bedroom semi for that care. Now people are whinging at a few quid out of their wages. Well, OK. And in those days of excruciating poverty, clearly, it was necessary. But the world has moved on. The world has moved on by quite a long way. So, do we still need the NHS in the form it is? Martin in Tottington says, I don't know the answer to this and hope a man of your intellect may. What would happen if this lady were to stop paying her national insurance contributions, assuming she was still working? She's been let down by the system, so would she be up for a double shafting? Well, you see, it's an unfortunate name, national insurance. It's not an insurance policy. It's not like your house insurance. You pay the premium, and if you have a difficulty related to that, the risk you've insured yourself against, they pay out, and if you don't, they keep the money. It's not that kind of insurance. It isn't really an insurance system in that sense. The money works in the same way that we all pay in and we get out, but much of the money put into the National Health Service, much of your national insurance contributions, don't pay for the NHS. They pay for welfare benefits of various kinds, and indeed retirement pension. Well, if she's going to die of cancer, her retirement won't be long, so you could say she's not going to get any pension, perhaps you put it on that. But it doesn't work like that. It's not a system where you pay in the hope of taking out. It's a system where you pay in the hope of never taking out, apart from the pensions. That's it. So it's not an insurance policy in the usual way. 0161228 2255. But you're right. If she was liable to pay NHS contributions and decided not to get her own back, if you like, then she would be in serious trouble. 0161228 2255. You got something to say? Well, that's fine. We're more than happy to hear you say it. You can send emails and other stuff. Radio Manchester at bbc.co.uk. You can do all of that. And, of course, you can text on 07786 206 951. Dead easy. 0161 228 2255. Dead easy. Just pick up the phone and have your say. We don't mind. All you have to do is drivel on. 0161 228 2255. Sounds repetitive, doesn't it? That's because it is. It's just after 20 to 2. Alexia O'Connor has the headlines.
A woman's been thrown onto a railway line at Farningham near Kent after asking two youths to stop smoking on the station platform. Police in Flixton are hunting a lone gunman who struck 3 times in 24 hours. And cancer sufferer Jean Murphy from Salford is celebrating after a mystery donor paid for drugs to prolong her life. The NHS had refused to foot the bill. Manchester's weather, rain this afternoon, the possibility of thunder and highs of 23 Celsius.
BBC Radio Manchester 2020 traffic.
Traffic on the M66 southbound all now returned to normal, thankfully, in light of an earlier accident involving a lorry and a car between Tewberry and 3 Hollins. Now, that accident was blocking the whole carriageway for a time, but within the last 10 to 15 minutes or so, those vehicles have been completely recovered. Aside from that, generally a fairly quiet afternoon on the roads, but a different situation, however, on the trains. If you're heading between Manchester Piccadilly towards London Euston, be aware that services have been suspended on Virgin trains. I'm afraid, really, that you'll have to check with National Rail Inquiries before you travel for more information. And don't forget, if you can update me further, make sure you call in, if you can, on the travel line on 0161 244 4951. I'm Cara Banks.
BBC Radio Manchester Sports with Joanne Smith.
Good afternoon. Manchester City owner Thaksin Shinawatra has admitted having talks to bring new funds into the club, but strongly denies trying to sell the Blues. The former Thai Prime Minister is still waiting to discover whether his £800 million of frozen assets will be released, with reports he's ready to sell up. But his advisor, Phil Hall, has told BBC Radio Manchester that investment talks have taken place, but are purely exploratory. Meanwhile, defender Vedran Chaluka is expected to complete his £7 million switch to Tottenham today. The Croatian is discussing personal terms with Spurs, but according to head of the official supporters club Kevin Parker, it would be a mistake to let him go.
That does suggest that the finances aren't how they should be, because there would be only one reason you would sell that player, and that's because you need the finance for something else. So maybe there's more in the Chaluka story than there is in the rehash story about Dr. Taksin wanting to sell.
Some news just in, and Manchester United defender Patrice Evra and Chelsea groundsman Sam Bethel have both denied the charges levelled against them by the Football Association over their part in the rout at Stamford Bridge last season. Both were involved in an angry confrontation during United's warm-up following their 2-1 defeat. Sir Alex Ferguson says his new assistant manager will be in place by next month. United let Carlos Queiroz leave to take over as Portugal boss, with Ferguson saying he's no closer to finding a replacement, but they have been taking their time. United, meanwhile, host Juventus in a friendly at Old Trafford this evening. That gets underway at 8 o'clock. Wigan manager Steve Bruce is weighing up the prospect of offering French striker Joel Thomas a contract. The 28-year-old was released by Kaiserslautern at the end of last season and played in the Latics win at Hibernian last night. With just under 3 days to go until the start of the new football season, new Bury goalkeeper Wayne Brown says manager Alan Knill convinced him the club is going places.
He sold me a club really well when we went for a meeting. Seems to me like a fantastic coach and good man management as well, so it should be one for the future as well for going up the leagues.
It's day one of Lancashire's county championship match with Sussex, and to be fair, it's been an awful start at Old Trafford for Lancashire. Here's Chris Malaband.
Just resumed after lunch here. 60 for 4 Lancashire in the 29th over. Francois Duplessis battling bravely on 20, and with him Stephen Croft on 18. Under cloudy skies on a humid morning, it seemed odd when Stuart Law elected to bat first, having won the toss, and Lancashire was soon in all sorts of trouble on 31 for 4, with Jason Lurie ripping out the top order, dismissing Vincent and Sutcliffe for ducks, Horton for 12, and then Luke Wright picking up Captain Law for 9. Duplessis and Croft working hard, though, to try and turn this position round for Lancashire, but it's slow progress against accurate bowling. Latest score at Old Trafford on day one of the championship match against Sussex. Lancashire are 60 for 4.
Steve Harmison and Stuart Broad have been recalled to the England side for the final test against South Africa at the Oval tomorrow. Ryan Sidebottom and Ravi Bopara have been left out. England will play 5 batsmen, with Ian Bell replacing former skipper Michael Vaughan at number 3. And new captain Kevin Peterson admits it is a risk.
It is a brave move, yes, but I think Collingwood came back to some pretty good nick last week. Freddie, I think I've been really impressed with the way Fred's batted for England so far since he's come back, in the control he showed at the start, where he's really got himself in, and then unfortunately he's had to bat a couple of times with the tail and really get on with it instead of building a real good 100. And I think that's something that Freddie wants to do, and it's something I want to see Freddie doing.
Sales Rory Lamont and new signing David Doherty will start tonight against Perpignan. The Sharks are taking part in the Challenge Vauquois tournament in France. And Mark Foster will mark his 5th Olympic Games by carrying the British flag at the opening ceremony in Beijing on Friday. The 38-year-old is one of the oldest athletes in this year's Games.
Becky White, the best guess, and a no dull people guarantee.
Manchester-born singer Rowetta, famously part of the Happy Mondays team.
To be honest, where I didn't want to be sent to the stage, I love being in Happy Mondays, where I didn't have to do interviews, be photographed. I was in a really horrible relationship with my ex-husband, and he battered me, and I went into a women's aid refuge in Longsight. I didn't want to be spotted. I didn't want him to know I still lived in Manchester. So singing with Happy Mondays was a big step for me, because it actually said the Happy Mondays are playing at such a place tonight.
Becky White, this afternoon from 2
at BBC Radio Manchester.
Neil in Babington says, via email, my cat committed the ultimate sin earlier this morning. It brought a mouse back that wasn't properly dead. I opened the back door only to be rushed by the cat, which bolted in, stopped, and presented one mouse in mouth, twitching tail and all. Get out with that thing, I yelled, to which the cat responded by dropping the mouse, which then ran fast and free. It took me the best part of 5 minutes to corner the thing, and it only stopped moving with a second wallop from the dustpan. I do truly dislike having to kill things that should have been brought back dead. My question and problem is this, says Neil. This isn't the first time Hellboy, as I nicknamed the cat, has brought a live one back. With you being a person of cat or cats, could you suggest a corrective course of action which would put the correct amount of kill back into my kitty? No. There isn't a correct amount of kill in your kitty. You're working on the presumption that the cat wanted the mouse dead. If the cat had wanted the mouse dead, the cat would have killed it. It isn't lack of kill. It's a desire for entertainment. Cats catch things and torture them before they kill them to while away some of those few hours that they're awake. And the only advice I have for you is get an heavier dustpan and stop being such a tart.
Allan Beswick with you on the phones. 0161 228 2255.
BBC Radio Manchester.
I hope this proves helpful. Oh, wait, we've got more. My kids have just renamed our cat Beswick because it's ginger and it's always in a bad mood and it's dead fat. That's not funny. That's not funny. I don't know what made you think that might be funny. Yes. Malcolm in Offerton. May you rot in hell. Paul in Salford. Hiya, Paul.
Hello, sir.
Hello, sir. What can we do for you?
Just a quick one for you.
All right.
I know you're against capital punishment. What's your views on professional jurors?
Professional who?
Jurors.
Jurors? I thought you said jewellers. I wondered the relevance. Professional jurors? You mean jurors who do that for a living?
Yep.
I'd be against that.
Are you happy with the present system?
Happy's a strong term. Well,
we've got the system at the moment is jurors are picked out of members of the public at random.
Yep.
12 good men and true, or women and true.
People
and true.
Yes.
And we keep getting it wrong.
All right. Well, first of all, let me tell you that I'm not happy with our present judicial system because that it would imply that it was perfect.
Right.
But I don't think there's a better one within our adversarial system. I don't think there's a better one readily available. I think the best process we've got, or the better parts of the process we've got, one of the better bits of the process we've got, is that jurors come to it with no legal knowledge, usually. Some of them might have, but they come to it with no legal knowledge and are required only to follow the arguments of both the prosecution and the defence, and then to decide, to judge, if you will, who they believe. Which set of circumstances. So I think if we had professional jurors, they would start to make judgments not on the basis of the evidence put before them, but on the basis of what they have been trained to do, or indeed have learned to do over the decades that they've been a juror.
But you're taking away the directive of the judge.
Well, the judge's directive ought to be a summary of the evidence presented by both sides and an explanation of what the law says about that evidence.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Now, whether judges are perfect at that or not, I would suggest that they are not perfect at it. That's why we have an appeals system.
Yeah.
But they're generally pretty good at it, and they will say, look, these are the salient points. The prosecution says he hit her with the lead pipe in the lounge. And the defence says he was never there. To prove the case, the prosecution has said that his DNA was found on the lead pipe and the victim and in the lounge. An expert has told us that there is 150 million to 1 chance of the DNA being found on those 3 items at the same time. You... members of the... I could be a judge, me. You members of the jury have to decide whether you believe the defence who says he wasn't there, and whether you accept the evidence of the expert that he must have been there at 150 million to 1 chance. That's the judge's job, and I think they generally do it pretty well.
I don't think Timothy Evans would agree with you, who was hung in 1950.
Well, Timothy Evans wasn't hanged on the basis of the kind of evidence I just referred to.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, yeah.
What the jury decided there was, and I didn't read the directions of the judge, but the case hung, if I remember correctly, on the accepted by both sides phrase, let him have it. Now, the jury...
That's the wrong one, mate. The Timothy Evans one was where Christie done it.
Oh, my sincere apologies.
It's not a problem.
I've got the wrong one. OK, where Christie is said to have done it. Go on.
He said Christie done it, and Christie happened to be one of the chief prosecution witnesses who swore Evans's life away in court, and evidence pointed to the guilt of Evans, who hung for it.
Yeah.
However,
but again, what we have to then look to is if we had professional jurors, would they have been more likely to make the correct decision or less likely? That's the issue. Not what would they.
That's not.
What do you think? Do you think professional jurors would be more likely to decide the correct set of facts or less likely?
Well, if we come back to more modern times, if we come back to 1974 with the Birmingham 6 and the Guildford 4, they'd have hung. Which is why you're against capital punishment.
Well, they'd have hanged if we had capital punishment, but the professionalism or otherwise of the jurors. The question you put originally was, what do I think of professional jurors? And frankly, I don't know, but I suspect that professional jurors would be no better at getting to the facts than amateur jurors. I just think they would pick up habits over the years.
That's fine.
Which perhaps would not be reliable.
I'll tell you what springs to mind before we go. 12 Angry Men. I know it's only a film,
but a very good
11
one.
of them were having the bloke executed, and there was one dissenter.
Yeah, there was.
And it caught on. So by the end of the film, they had 12 people saying he didn't do it. But Barry George, the latest one, he spent 8 years in prison for a crime he never committed. He'd have probably hung if capital punishment was still there.
He would have hanged, yes.
Yeah. So that's why you're against capital punishment.
No, that's not why I'm against it. That's the easiest argument to put against capital punishment, that we can't correct our errors.
Once we've committed the error,
once we've put the person to death, we can't undead them. But that's not why I'm against it. I'm against it because I believe we human beings should aspire to be better than that.
Yeah, of course,
That's
what
why
right
I'm
have
against
we got to take away the life of another human being? Yeah.
Well, I just think we should aspire to be better than that. And
unfortunately, you hear more about people being murdered, and it makes you think in favour of capital punishment. But the reason why I'm against it is in case we get the wrong one.
Well, yes, and that's a very, very... I mean, that's a very, very difficult argument to overcome, and I do...
We started to get it right in 1964 with the Moors murderers, but unfortunately, capital punishment, when they were convicted, it was over and done with 3 weeks previously.
Well, yes, it was. But the argument I always like to dwell on is the fact that it existed at the time of the offences. So it didn't stop them doing it. They could reasonably have expected to be hanged if they were found guilty of their offences when they were committing them. But I'm
sorry, I've drifted from the original question, but it was in 2 parts, actually. But
don't you worry, we wander a wiggly-waggly course on this programme. Have a good day, Paul. Cheers, mate.
Thank you very much.
The wiggly-waggly way. Absolutely. Simon in Manchester, what have you got?
I've got a wiggly-waggly tale for you.
You get a lot of funny offers in this job. Go on, mate.
I'm sure you do. No, my point was, basically, if, let's presume the NHS is in not financial trouble, but the drug companies develop all these new fancy drugs and put a lot of research and development and millions of pounds and trials and whatever into developing these drugs. And for example, in the unfortunate cases of people who've developed cancer and so on, sometimes the PCT will turn around and say, okay, well, the drugs are available, but unfortunately there's not enough money to pay for the treatment. I think it's a pretty sad case when that happens. So would it be possible, or maybe it would be an idea for the government to offer an incentive for individuals to have private healthcare. So maybe that would help pay towards the cost. I mean, I understand it costs thousands and thousands of pounds for drugs companies to develop new, and they've got to be paid for it. They're not a charity; they're a registered company who develop these drugs. But it's pretty sad when time again.
You would have a problem there in that the National Health Service presents itself as a service available to all.
Correct.
And if you imagine, because I like politicians, I really do, and I believe politicians overwhelmingly strive to make the world a better place. But I don't trust the buggers. And I can see the situation, if we allowed that to pretend, if we allowed that system to work, saying, well, OK, we can't afford this drug, but I noticed that you've got Bupa, so get Bupa to pay for it. OK, fine. In that situation, gone. But what would happen next? Would they then spend the money saved on another National Health Service patient? Or would they, in fact, reduce the amount they put into the National Health, thus encouraging others to have Bupa? And then reduce it still further, encouraging others to have Bupa, and others to have Bupa, until eventually 50% of the people getting treated in this country are getting treated by Bupa. And then people are saying, what do we need the National Health Service for? Everybody's getting treated by Bupa. They can't afford Bupa. Well, screw them. They shouldn't be poor. And that's what we'd end up with.
Yeah, well, the NHS was set up same as with dentistry as well.
Oh, well,
people who work
we have seen how successful the giving people the right to go private and use the NHS has been successful. The dentist has been such a good model. It's worked well. Good to talk to you, Simon. I've got to go. You can stick around if you want.
Join me, Mike Shaft, this Sunday from 7 as we meet Manchester musician Kieran Metcalf on